Um, Welcome, and I hope you can join the chat box if you have any questions today. We'll be discussing farm workers and their legal dilemma. Since COVID-19 hit the U.S., many farm worker families have been struggling just to put food on the table, a tragic irony for the essential workers who are harvesting our food. So many folks are wanting to know the status of the public charge rule that says immigrants applying for a change in their status can't be dependent on various forms of public benefits. So that's why we've invited two special guests today to talk about that and some other things in the legal realm. Clarisa is an immigration attorney with California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation, and Iris is a senior immigrant attorney for Farmworker Justice. I'll be introducing them soon. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit about our contest that's going on right now. It's for children in the field. So any child of farm workers, seasonal or migrant, who's between the ages of 10 and 18 years old is eligible to apply. And we have two categories of art and essay. So please look up our, let me just take that into the window here. Let me put the website on. So please go to that website for our contest guidelines and application and send that in to us. The contest goes until July 15th. And we also want to just thank everyone who's been participating in this live Thursday project so far. It's been an effort on the part of the Association of Farm Worker Opportunity Programs, AFOP, to bring information from the farm worker community to our viewers, to our followers, a lot of whom are also farm workers and farm worker families. So it's been a real learning experience, and I've really appreciated all of the guests that we've had on to interview. So if you're interested in getting our announcements about this and other things related to farm workers, please send your email to us. Send me a message right now, and I'll add you to that list. So we have Iris Figueroa from Farmworker Justice and Clarisa Reyes-Becerra from California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation. And so I just want to give a brief introduction for both of them. Iris has been a staff attorney at Farmworker Justice since 2016. She engages in advocacy and community education for farm workers on issues related to immigration, labor rights, and occupational health and safety. Previously, Iris worked at various civil society organizations throughout the US and Latin America for the protection and advancement of economic and social rights. Ms. Figueroa has lived and worked in various countries in Central America, including Guatemala, Honduras, and Costa Rica. She's originally from Puerto Rico, and she's a native Spanish speaker. She graduated from Georgetown University in 2007 and earned her law degree from Columbia Law School in 2010. And then Clarisa Reyes-Becerra is an immigration attorney with the California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation. She focuses on how immigration status affects the ability of immigrants to access health care and public benefits. And she seeks to enforce federal and state rights to access health care for immigrant communities. She's been at the forefront of CRLAF's public charge outreach efforts, informing and advising families on how public charge might affect their potential for immigration relief. So, with no further ado, welcome Clarisa and Iris.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Our pleasure. So we have a few questions prepared for Iris and Clarisa, and at the end of those questions, we will invite the followers, everyone who's on our video right now, to comment, and we will also field those questions. So just starting out, I think Iris, could you review additional rights that undocumented farm workers might have been promised under the recent aid packages passed by Congress, like the CARES Act?
Sure. So some people might be aware Congress has passed various pieces of legislation since this COVID crisis started last month. And there's some provisions, various provisions in there that might help workers in general. So that includes expanded sick leave and family leave through the end of this year, an expansion of unemployment benefits, individual stimulus payments for people, and also increased funding for COVID testing and for medical facilities, including rural health centers. However, unfortunately, some of those provisions actually exclude undocumented individuals. So, for example, they're not eligible for unemployment insurance. They also, when it comes to the stimulus payments, there's a requirement that only people with social security numbers are able to claim that. And there was a lot of advocacy from the immigrant community to include folks with ITIN who are paying into the system, but unfortunately that was not in the final legislation. So actually just this week, there's been various lawsuits filed about that particular issue, and that might affect mixed status families. And there's a lot of advocacy going on to make sure that these exclusions are taken away and are fixed in future COVID legislation. But there's also issues that just haven't been addressed at all that we're advocating for. So two main issues that we're advocating for is hazard pay for essential workers during this time, and also for OSHA, which is the main federal agency that is tasked with protecting workers, to issue an emergency standard specifically on COVID with requirements for employers to protect workers.
That's awesome. I'm so glad you're doing that work. Clarisa, how about you?
So one thing that I think really depends on where you live, specifically your state, is that there are a lot of programs that are available to families regardless of immigration status. So for example, I'm in California, and California has paid family leave. And that was actually a program that existed before all this went down with the coronavirus and all the CARES Act, Families First Act. And paid family leave allows for several weeks of paid leave. It's partial pay, so I think like 60 to 70% of your pay, but it allows you to stay home with your family during that time that you are supposed to have the right to, under the FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, to take time off. So not only do you get to take the time off, but you also get to take the time off with pay. It's paid for by the state of California, and it's something that's specific to the state. There are probably other programs in other states. California is definitely not the only one, but it is a great program. There's also disability insurance in California, which means that if you get sick, you can also take time off with pay, as long as you get certification from a doctor that you are ill. And in this case, they've expanded the illnesses to include the coronavirus. So it's also another way on top of the programs that are in the emergency packages by the federal government, that if you might not qualify them, maybe because of the size of your employer or because of your immigration status, California has programs regardless of immigration status. So I think it's helpful to make sure that if you need the resources, there are plenty of them out there. If you live in California, the Employment Development Department, EDD, if you just Google EDD, has a great description of all the programs that are available. California has also created an immigrant guide so that families can navigate in Spanish and English which benefits they might qualify for. And I know that our organization as well has created a table on our resource flyer so that families can know what the benefits are, who's it paid for? Is it by your employer? Is it by the state, by the federal government? And what do you qualify for? Is it with pay, without pay? And do you need immigration status for it?
Yeah, that's a great point. And one thing I would add is the federal provisions are meant for folks that don't have that leave already. So if you have, through collective bargaining agreement or through your state law, other protections, those are still there. Those aren't going to be just taken away because there's now a federal bill. And so just making sure that people are aware of that. And since you mentioned employer size, so the provisions apply to employers who have 500 employees or less. But there is a possible exemption that some employers that have 50 employees or less might use. So that's something we're monitoring. And if folks are hearing about ag employers trying to take advantage of that exemption, it's supposed to be only for employers where it's really going to threaten the viability of their business. So we want to keep an eye on that and make sure that folks aren't being denied the leave that they should be getting.
Yeah, and one thing actually specific to ag workers and to ag employers that's important is that California just made sure that even if an ag employer would have been exempted from the family or paid leave provisions, the CARES Act and Families First Act, they've made it so that in those particular employment fields, so usually agricultural work, families should be entitled to paid sick leave. So they expanded that definition. So if you would fall through the cracks in any of the other previous paid sick leave provisions, California has made it so that agricultural workers do not fall through those cracks. So that's some. Oh, sorry. So I think that's something that's important for families to know, and make sure that if they're in this field, and this is who we're talking to right now, then your family should not fall through the cracks, and you should be eligible for paid sick leave.
I'm always aware of the special status that California holds as a state that's nice to its workers. And as Dolores Huerta brings that up as a point of pride a lot of times, that as a result of her and others' work in the civil rights era, that California has a lot more protections for farm workers than a lot of other states do. And if only we could all live in California. Iris, moving on to the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. I know that's been a while since that was introduced and passed in Congress. So what are, first of all, could you give a brief overview of that act and its benefits for farm workers, and then Farmworker Justice's thoughts on its chance of becoming law?
Sure. So the Farm Workforce Modernization Act is a bipartisan bill. It actually passed in the House last December, which, having an immigration bill pass in this political context is no small thing. And what it does is it gives work authorization, protection from deportation, and a path to citizenship for undocumented farm workers and for their families as well. And obviously, we know this is crucial because as we've just been talking, immigration status can really affect workers' ability to speak up on the job and to get the services that they need for themselves and their families. And so, like I said, it passed in the House in December. We have a fact sheet that I think we can maybe put the link up to, and it's available in English and Spanish about what's in the bill. And so we're working right now to make sure that the Senate also passes the bill. I think that if anything, this crisis has shown just how essential these workers are and how we really don't, it's already way too late to address the situation. And we shouldn't be losing any more time in terms of making sure that these workers are protected.
Yeah, especially now that we don't know what's happening with DACA in the future. So I think we'll talk about a little bit more about that in the future, but I think we need remedies now. And so hopefully we'll see some progress.
Do you know, because it was passed through both houses, or am I wrong about that? Was it passed by the House and the Senate, or just the House?
Are you talking about the Farm Workers Force? Just the House,
Oh, okay.
In December. Yeah. So we're waiting on the Senate right now.
Okay, got it. I want to remind our viewers that you can type questions into the chat box. We'll be covering a lot of ground here with the questions we've prepared, but by no means are we going to cover everything. So please, if you have some pressing questions, put them in the chat box. Also, let us know where you're joining us from. And I also want to make sure both of our experts on here today, Iris and Clarisa, have organizations that have amazing resources for workers, farm workers, and undocumented workers. So I'm throwing one up on the screen right now. That's a survey that you can go and take. And then once you take the survey, you will be taken to the page for resources on the coronavirus. And then Farmworker Justice has a wealth of information as well. And a lot of those links will be typed into the chat by my coworker Vashti. So keep an eye out. Okay, so the next question is first for Clarisa, and then I'm going to also give the same question to Iris. What does the public charge rule mean for undocumented workers?
Yeah, so I think that's a question that we've all been trying to figure out for the past several years, actually, when public charge started as a rumor and I think really started causing fear among families. Right now at the California Rural Legal Assistance Foundation, we're still trying to do a lot of outreach and make sure that families understand who it applies to, who it doesn't apply to, what is public charge even in the first place. And I think one thing that is, if you're in California and you want a webinar or like a group presentation for yourself, please feel free to let us know. That's what we're trying to do, make sure that every family knows what benefits that they're entitled to receive, especially because even if parents can't receive the benefit, children definitely can if they were born here and are citizens. And a lot of times, even if they're not, even if children were born outside of the United States, a lot of states have been really good about extending benefit status or eligibility to children. Just for a quick summary about the public charge test, it's used by immigration officials to decide if a person can enter the United States with a visa or if they can obtain legal permanent resident status or, to get a green card here in the US. The test basically says that if the public finds that you will become a public charge, it's because they believe that you will become dependent in the future on the government for your well-being and your financial welfare, meaning that they believe that you'll need to use public benefits to survive in this country. It's used to kind of exclude families that they think will be of low income, will need their services in the future. And so it really can impact a lot of lower income families. People are confused as to when a public charge applies. And the good thing is that it doesn't apply when you're applying for a public benefit like Medicaid or food assistance. It doesn't affect your eligibility for those benefits. The test only applies when someone is applying for a green card or for a visa. And so I think for undocumented families, a lot of times we have to explain that if you're an undocumented parent and you have a child who is like 5 years old, maybe 10 years old, and they're not going to be able to apply for you until they're 21 years old, you have so many years in between now and the time that you're able to apply for a green card or for any kind of relief that you shouldn't have to worry about public charge unless you have someone else who's going to be able to apply for you. So really, we're trying to encourage families, unless they're applying for a green card right now or in the near future, then public charge shouldn't be the biggest concern for them. But just so that people have a sense of what public charge, who it applies to and who it doesn't apply to, like I mentioned, it only applies to people when they're applying for a green card or for a visa. And there are so many categories of immigrants who are completely exempt, meaning they're not included in the public charge test at all. So if you already have U.S. citizenship, not a problem for you. You already have like this golden status here in the country. Most legal permanent residents don't have to worry about public charge. The only time they have to worry about it is if they've left the country for more than 6 months, then that might be an issue. And so that means they don't have to worry about it as a legal permanent resident when they're applying to naturalize, meaning trying to become a citizen here in the United States, or when they're renewing their green card every 10 years or so. Most DACA and TPS holders also don't have to worry about public charge when they're renewing their temporary status. But if they're going to apply through a family member, then they might have to, consider public charge as a concern. So that's something that you should talk to an immigration attorney about. And then there's a bunch of other categories like U visa applicants, T visa applicants for people who have been victims of crimes here in the U.S., VAWA self-petitioners for people who have been victims of domestic violence, asylees and refugees, and many others. They are completely exempt, meaning they don't have to do the public charge test when they're applying for a green card or for a visa. So I think that's important to know, because a lot of times, a lot of families don't even apply through a family petition or through an employer. They apply when they are a victim of a crime, or there are other ways to get immigration relief. And so those categories are completely exempt. There's also very few benefits that are actually included as a part of the new public charge rule, like federal Medicaid, housing assistance, and SNAP, which is like food assistance, food stamps. But it's important to know that there are a bunch of exemptions, like emergency Medicaid, Medicaid for pregnant women, Medicaid for children and at schools, and state Medicaid programs. So like in California, if you have DACA and you are receiving Medi-Cal, which is the Medicaid program here in the state, that's a state program, and therefore that is not a program that is considered in the public charge rule. And there are so many other benefits that are not included in the test, like WIC, women, infants, and children, public health services that are available to the whole community. So when a vaccine comes out and they make it available to everyone, hopefully that should not be considered a public charge benefit if you get it for free. Education services, unemployment, and other benefits that we talked about, like paid family leave, disability, workers' compensation during this time of the coronavirus. Those are all benefits that are not included in the rule. And just real quick, even if you do need to use a public benefit like Medicaid or unemployment during this time, and even if they don't count, but maybe you're still concerned that it might be a public charge issue, USCIS, the immigration agency that looks over green card applications here in the United States, has made the announcement that they will not consider testing, treatment, or preventative care, including vaccines if one becomes available, related to the coronavirus in a public charge test, even if that treatment or testing was provided because somebody used a public benefit. So and one thing to know is that especially during this time, we've seen this statement by USCIS, by immigration agencies, saying that it's better to get the care that you need now, and then afterwards you can explain it in a declaration. You can talk about why the coronavirus has put you in a situation where you might have needed to use a public benefit.
That's great to hear, Clarisa. Iris, do you
Yeah.
have anything to add?
Yeah, so that was a great summary, Clarissa.
Go ahead.
I would just add, in terms of exceptions that programs that people use, and we know that farm workers and their families use, and even more so now, things like food banks, school lunch programs, migrant and seasonal Head Start. None of those are going to count towards public charge. So folks should, again, not accessing these services because of that they may need literally life and death situations because of public charge. And like Clarissa said, if there's beneficiaries in your household, if you have a mixed status household and your child is entitled to a benefit, that's not going to count against you if you're not the beneficiary. So we've unfortunately seen people disenrolling, for example, their U.S. citizen children from programs that they actually are entitled to, and that wouldn't be considered. The problem with the public charge rule, even as Clarissa explained so well, how narrow it is that it's still producing a huge chilling effect. And so we have been advocating, along with a broader group of health and immigration advocates, that the rule be suspended or paused, at least during this COVID crisis. And so those are efforts that are also ongoing at this time.
I'm going to also type into the screen here the link to Farmworker Justice's resources at this time.
Yeah, and we have a fact sheet specifically on public charge that lays out the specific benefits and what the considerations are in terms of determining whether someone is a public charge and how it applies to farm workers.
And that will be typed into the chat box. You'll see that link soon. It's just easier to click it from the chat box than it is from the screen.
I think so. We've made some videos at CRLA Foundation in Spanish that, you know, a lot of times right now we can't really do presentations in person. So this was a way that we did it through YouTube, where we just created like an informational video. It's about 15 minutes, and it kind of gives you a very thorough layout of what public charge is, who it applies to, who it doesn't apply to, and what benefits are included, and what to be kind of on the lookout for. And if you don't want to watch all 15 minutes, you can also watch just like little 3 to 5 minute segments of it, so that you can break it up, because I know 15 minutes can be a long time. So that is one way that if, you know, you can't have someone come to your school or to your community organization anymore because of the coronavirus and the pandemic, this is one way to still get a presentation on it.
Great. Thank you, Clarisa. And thank you, Iris. I think that's really reassuring and really important to emphasize again to all farm workers in the farm worker community. And I actually, before speaking to you both yesterday, wasn't aware that there was an exemption being made during the coronavirus for public charge, so that's going to be taken into consideration. And I know, Iris, you said that you have your doubts about how that will actually be implemented. But I think the general consensus is that everyone should do what they need to do to survive right now.
I think, can I clarify real quick on that? So when we say that USCIS has made this statement, what's actually really important to know is that most of the benefits that people would have been using anyway would not have been a part of the public charge test. So a lot of times states are now including treatment and testing for the coronavirus in their emergency Medicaid packages or their benefits. And emergency Medicaid is actually one of the exemptions in the rule. So it wouldn't have been a public charge benefit anyway. Or a lot of the emergency aid that's going out right now on disaster relief is also part of an exemption. So I think the USCIS has made that, it's kind of confusing because it's as if USCIS is saying these benefits would have counted against you anyway if the coronavirus hadn't happened, but that's not really true. So I think one of the things to note is that while it's good that we have this statement out there, and I think it helps to clarify some things, if you really get into the weeds of it, so much of it wouldn't have counted, or so much of these benefits wouldn't have counted anyway. So I think it's still a good message to get out there, because I think families will be able to explain themselves even if they do use a benefit, and will always be able to cite back to this if, you know, USCIS gives anyone trouble later. But it's just important to note that most of these benefits, you know, as Edie was pointing out, there's so many benefits that aren't a part of the public charge rule to begin with. And so families should be making sure that they get the benefits that they need to stay stable and secure during this time.
So Clarisa, the next question you may have already answered, So we can skip on to the next, if that's the case. The services that farm workers who are not yet citizens and who might eventually apply to become citizens, is there like a list somewhere of all the ones they can access without jeopardizing any future application process?
I'm pretty sure actually your Farmworker Justice flyer, Edie, describes, like, it has a whole list. And I think any public flyer, any public charge flyer really kind of tries to emphasize that there's so few benefits that are considered in public charge that there's just a huge list of benefits that don't count at all. So I think some of the ones that Edie's already mentioned and that I mentioned were WIC, Medicaid for pregnant women, Medicaid for children, emergency Medicaid, so Head Start, any kind of educational program, financial aid, unemployment benefits, paid family leave, paid sick leave, disability insurance, workers' compensation, food banks, general community services or public health services. So if, a lot of times also if you go to a community health clinic and they do services for free or low cost, that's also not a public benefit. There's just so many that if it's really not that small list of benefits, then it doesn't count towards the public charge rule. So I think kind of when you look at those flyers, and I imagine Farmworker Justice has like a whole list of ones that don't count, you'll just see the count are much more than the ones that do count.
And I just typed that. I think I forgot to forward that on to the team to put that in the chat box. So I just put in myself the fact sheet for public charge from Farmworker Justice. So please avail yourself of that.
And I think the bottom line is what Clarisa said, unless it's that specific list of benefits, whatever's not on the list of what's going to count against you won't, right? And then the other thing that she had mentioned, but also to emphasize, is that state-based programs also don't count. So folks, depending on where they are, there might be even other programs that we're not thinking of that might be available that the state is providing.
And I think at the end of the day, if you still have questions about public charge because you're concerned that, you know, you're going to be applying for a green card or for a visa, or you're just concerned about it because it is a confusing rule, and that was on purpose. That was something that was it's confusing even for lawyers and advocates. It took us a long time to make sure we understood the rule before we could explain it to families. So if you're still confused and have questions, talk to an immigration attorney. There's an immigration legal services directory that is, it lists all the different immigration nonprofits out there that do services for free or for low cost, especially consultations. Like, so something like a public charge question. So that's something that you should definitely be able to access. And a lot of times these organizations will refer you to fact sheets, or they'll be able to talk to you in person. But I think that's, you know, it's better to be informed and to have the facts rather than to disenroll, like Edie was saying. Like, it's, you know, you don't want to disenroll or not enroll for a benefit, especially if you need it right now, when it doesn't account against you, or it could, you know, not have any consequence against you in the near future.
I'm also entering that directory right now, so you all can see it. I also wanted to touch on the, sorry, I'm finding my place. The health risks that farm workers are all facing right now in working when no one else is working, or I mean, you know, going out and working and coming into contact with a lot of other people. As essential workers, their health is often not being prioritized. They're being forced to take risks. So what recourse do they have if they are not getting the right protections at work? Is there any kind of whistleblowing that they can do? Iris, maybe you can speak to that.
Sure. So like I said before, OSHA is the main federal agency that protects workplace safety for workers. There's a couple of issues that might go to other agencies, like, for example, EPA regulates pesticides, but mostly it's OSHA. And that's why, as I mentioned before, we're advocating for a federal OSHA standard on COVID. So workers in the workplace are protected regardless of their immigration status. That's something that I want to make really clear. Like, your immigration status has no bearing on your right to a safe workplace. And so you can denounce an unsafe workplace. There's provisions against retaliation by the employer. And OSHA has a whole whistleblower protection program. Unfortunately, though, as I said, federal OSHA has not issued standards specific to COVID. However, different states, about half of the states, have their own state OSHA plans. And some of those states that have state OSHA plans and have other mechanisms and agencies that deal with workplace safety have stepped up and put in place standards in the absence of federal action. So in our COVID resource page that you put up the link to, there's some links to some of those state measures that have been put in place. Additionally, we work with a lot of legal services organizations, and we have a legal services directory for folks who serve farm workers and their families. So if folks have questions or want to move forward with a complaint and want to know how to best do that, you can either go to the directory that we already posted or email me and I can send you your state specific information. And we know also that union and worker advocacy organizations are also working on a lot of these issues, and many times there's strength in numbers in people in the workplace coming together to denounce these situations. So those are some of the ways that folks can sort of push back against those situations.
I'm entering the OSHA state plans into the chat box right now. This is a thing that I didn't realize I was able to do during the chat, and so I'm having a little too much fun with it. So thank you, Iris. That's really, really helpful. What is the word right now on ICE enforcement activities? I know people are scared, and you know, in general, the farm worker community tries to keep a low profile. But has there been any change under COVID?
There has. So they have put out some guidance similar to what Clarisa was mentioning with USCIS, where they put out a statement specific on COVID. ICE has put out some statements regarding COVID. First of all, they reiterated that their sensitive locations policy is still in place. And for those who may not be familiar with it, this is a policy that predated COVID, and it's guidance for ICE to not do enforcement actions in sensitive locations. So that includes schools, that includes places where medical services are being provided, such as hospitals or clinics. So they've reaffirmed that that's still in place and that they're not going to be doing enforcement actions in medical locations unless there are extraordinary, the language they use is extraordinary circumstances. So that's one thing that they've said. They've also have a whole page with guidance regarding COVID, where they say that their enforcement priority is going to be for individuals who threaten public safety, and that they're going to use discretion to either delay the enforcement actions until after the COVID crisis or use other means other than detention. And some of the data that they've put out suggests that their enforcement has gone down relative to the same period last year. Having said that, ICE doesn't always have a perfect record of complying with its own guidance. So we know that immigration advocates on the ground are really monitoring them. And one issue that is not relevant as much to farm workers, but is a very important issue, is also immigration detention and the danger of COVID contagion in immigration detention. We've sadly already seen news of actually immigration officials who have died from COVID in some of these facilities. And because you have all these people together, there's been a lot of challenges with sanitation and other issues, just again, under normal times. That's also a big concern and something that people are advocating for detainees to be released in order to preserve everyone's health. And so that's another issue that immigration advocates are working on.
Yes, it's extremely urgent, and I really hope that people can get out soon. I want to make sure y'all saw this resource I'm putting in right now, and it's the Undocumented, I think, or is it the resources that I think Clarisa sent me for undocumented families and immigrants. So please click on that if you need the information.
Yeah, I think it's broken up by state. And so there's a lot of private funds out there, depending on your type of work or what kind of family you come from. There's just a private fund of individuals and organizations who have put money together, especially for families who don't otherwise qualify for some of the other federal benefits and unemployment stuff that's out there. So, I mean, you know, a lot of times when we do consultations on immigration stuff and families ask us, so what else do we qualify for? What else can we get if we can't pay our bills, if we can't pay our rent right now? And I think it really depends on where you live. So like in California, we have a moratorium on evictions, but that doesn't really help people pay the bills. And so this is one way to find some smaller organizations that are able to provide that relief. And so I know in California, we're supposed to have a disaster relief fund, and we're supposed to hopefully hear from the governor soon about how they're going to disperse it and how it's going to get into the hands of families. But in the meantime, these are just smaller private funds that families can look to.
And it's very detailed. You even had a column specifying if they have funds currently or not. Mm-hmm. So it really cuts out a lot of the time that people need to research to find out, or even just get denied. They can just focus their energies where they'll be most productive. So that's very helpful. We just got a question from someone about the immigrant children who are in these detention centers, wondering if they will be released soon. So I think you said we're working on it. Not yet, though.
So we FJ doesn't do as much detention work directly because the farm worker population is usually already people that are settled in the communities. I mean, there might be people who are detained because they're undocumented, but there are whole organizations whose focus is the detention monitoring. And yes, they are advocating very hard. There's been a couple of like specific health priorities of people, but yes, that's absolutely something that they're advocating for. Again, in normal times, right? We don't believe that children should be detained to begin with, but especially during a health crisis like this.
Exactly. Yes, it's extremely concerning and maddening, and it's really hard for me not to just like blow up our page with news about it. It's just really disheartening. Yeah, so moving on, the Children in the Fields campaign, we advocate for farm worker children, and many of them may be DACA recipients. So Clarisa, what recommendations do you have for DACA members or recipients right now?
I think right now it's starting to get a little more in the news again because we're kind of just waiting to see what the Supreme Court says on the big DACA case. We typically see decisions in the late spring, early summer. So maybe in June we might see the decision, but maybe before then. In the meantime, though, we're telling families and people who have DACA is that even if you can't apply for DACA right now for the first time, if you already have DACA or had DACA, make sure you renew it so that your status lasts as long as possible if the Supreme Court decision goes not so well. So say that if you have DACA right now and it's going to expire in a year, that's okay. Go renew it so that when you renew it, you at least have 2 more years, not just 1. We've seen people even renew longer, like even before their status is going to expire in a year, like maybe 1.5 years. So it really is just up to the organizations in your area who might be able to help you renew. Also, some states and localities have made additional funds available to help people apply to pay for that fee. It's like $500, so it's not cheap. But I know in California we have a specific fund that they've made available to help families with lower income thresholds. So if they qualify based on their income, they can receive the assistance in order to pay for that DACA fee. We're really just making sure that we want to send the message that prepare for the worst, but hope for the best. And I think right now we're seeing the way that the politics is going and everything, you just never know what's going to happen. And so we rather that the people who have DACA right now get the status that they can for the longest time that they can. I think this is also a good time to find out that if you have DACA, what other forms of immigration relief do you qualify for? Have you ever been a victim of a crime? Do you have a family member who can apply for you? Are you getting married anytime soon? Not that your immigration, not that your life should ever be driven by your immigration need, but at the same time, it's always good to know your options, because if something doesn't go well and, once DACA does expire, or if it ever, and hopefully it doesn't, but if it does, at least you know your options. So as immigration attorneys, we're making sure that every time we do a DACA consult or we help someone fill out their paperwork, we're not just asking them questions about DACA, we're asking them questions about their other immigration circumstances so that they are prepared and they are they have their information in front of them about what they could qualify for in the future, and maybe they can start preparing for something right now.
Thank you very much. I have one more question, and then we'll move into the audience's questions. We want to talk a little bit about the census and remind our viewers that it's happening right now. and how important it is to make sure that you are counted, that your family is counted, because it will make a difference in what funds and what services are available for you down the line. So Clarisa, could you talk a little bit about CRLAF's efforts on this right now?
Yeah, of course. So I think before we were really trying to get out in the communities about making sure we do presentations, inform families that there is not a citizenship question on the census. Yeah, that was a big problem and a big issue earlier this year. And so we want to assure families that doesn't matter what kind of immigration status if you have, if you're a citizen, resident, have no status, if you have a visa, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that you fill out the census, have your whole family counted. Because as Kendra was saying, the more people that are counted in your area, that means the more funding that can go to your community, your health services, your schools. It's really helpful to understand who is here and where can the money of the government go to, and everyone should be counted. And so before we were going kind of doing all these presentations, getting out in the community, and right now that's not really possible. But we're trying to make sure that people know that you don't have to wait for the piece of mail to come in for you to necessarily go online and fill out the census. There's online form. There's a place where you can call in. There's many ways to do that. And so I can send that to you, Kendra, maybe later today, but there are several ways to make sure that you are counted for the census. And especially if you're afraid you don't want anyone coming to your door, census officials aren't government officials. They're people who are either volunteers or kind of temporarily employed for the purpose of the census. So they're not there to knock on your door to report you to ICE. But even if you don't want anyone to come to your door, it's better to make sure that you're counted and they have it on record that you've already filled out the form, and then they shouldn't go knocking at your door.
Great, thank you. Iris, do you have anything to add? I think I'm out of questions, but I think Farmworker Justice does so much great work in so many areas. Is there anything that I didn't touch on that you'd like to mention?
No, on the census, we submitted comments back when there was some consideration of including that question that Clarisa mentioned about immigration status, which was a terrible idea, and thankfully they backed away from. And so we just want to make sure that now that battle has been won, that folks make sure that they're counted.
Great. I actually haven't gotten very many questions from the audience, so I do want to just thank everyone for joining us today. Clarisa, do you have anything else that you would like to add? Because I think we can end a little early.
Wow. Well, I think just always important to know your rights. So, make sure that if there's tons of materials out there that if you are concerned about immigration enforcement at all, just know, that ICE always needs a warrant. They can't just come barge into your door. You have rights. You have a right to remain silent. There are so many things that people should know, especially if they're at all concerned about it. But I think more important than anything is always talk to an immigration attorney, get a free consult, see what you qualify for. Because at the end of the day, right now, with no necessarily comprehensive immigration bill coming out in the near future, and we're more focused on the pandemic, people should just make sure that they're informed and know their rights so that, if something ever does happen, they're prepared.
And we have lots of resources in the chat box. So, and I think someone was asking if this will be available later on as a hard copy. Yes, it will. It will be posted on our page again, and you can just download it and share it. I also want to give you all the opportunity to say anything in Spanish if you'd like. I don't speak Spanish very fluently. It'd be a little embarrassing if I tried. So if there's any words of reassurance that you would like to give to the Farmworker community in Spanish, I want to leave that opportunity as well.
Bueno, yo diría que quiero aprovechar la oportunidad para darle las gracias a todos los trabajadores y trabajadoras, porque en estos momentos de crisis, yo creo que es difícil para todos nosotros, no importa cuál sea nuestra situación personal o profesional, pero los trabajadores y las trabajadoras han enfrentado tantas crisis ya, sea desastres naturales, sea condiciones en el trabajo, y siempre me dan tanta inspiración con su fortaleza, su valentía y su espíritu de solidaridad siempre. Entonces, yo creo que esta crisis la vamos a enfrentar igual.
Igualmente, pero también conozca sus derechos, mantenga su salud, su seguridad, mantenga que están saludables ahorita en este tiempo. Todos tienen derechos en este país, no importa su estado de inmigración, todos tienen derechos y pues es mejor que conocemos nuestros derechos, conozca sus derechos, por favor. Y muchísimas gracias a todos que todavía están afuera trabajando, dándonos comida en este tiempo. Sin ustedes no vamos a sobrevivir esto. Pues muchísimas gracias a todos, a ustedes y a sus familias. No puedo decir más de eso. Muchísimas gracias.
Exactamente. Muchísimas gracias a ustedes también. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing your expertise with us. And we look forward to all of you joining us again next week, not with these two ladies, but with some more folks who will be interviewed right here on Children in the Fields campaign. And a reminder again, please visit our website, cif.org afop.org/CIF for information on our contest guidelines. So thank you again so much. I hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.